They left me behind like something you throw away when it's no longer useful, like an old couch dumped on the curb after years of wear and tear. But what they didn't know was that my story wasn't over. Before we dive in, my dear, take a moment to subscribe to this channel and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I want to hear from my sisters scattered across this world, those who still carry fire in their hearts. Now let me take you back. Back to the day everything changed. I'll never forget that sky, dull gray, heavy, pressing down like it wanted to crush my shoulders. One of those skies that doesn't need to say a word. You just know something bad is about to happen. My heart already knew before the phone even rang. It was Karen, my oldest daughter, calling early in the morning. Her voice was just a little too sweet, like cheap candy. "Hey, Mom, we're stopping by with Ethan and Caleb, just to help you sort through a few things, okay?" Help! I swallowed hard. Something in her tone made me uneasy. But I chose to believe her. Because that's what I always did. I believed in them. I prepared the house like it was Sunday lunch. Fresh coffee brewed, buttery cookies on a blue tray, teacups arranged just so, 4 of them, like one of those perfect little family moments you see in commercials. I wore my soft pink sweater, the one Martin always said brought out the color. In my cheeks, put on a touch of lipstick, caught my reflection in the toaster. Maybe it was silly, but I still wanted to be pretty in my children's eyes. I still wanted to feel loved. Then I heard the door open, too loud, too abrupt, like a warning. Karen walked in first. Her face had that cold expression I'd seen before, slightly arched brows, lips pressed tight, as if she were bracing to say something unpleasant. Ethan barely looked up from his phone. And Caleb. He carried a folder under his arm and avoided my gaze. "Mom," Karen began. Her voice was soft, gentle even, but something about it felt staged. "We've been talking a lot lately, and..." Right there, I knew. When someone says, "We've been talking," it means they've already decided for you. She spoke like I was a child, slowly, carefully, like she was sparing me. Said they'd found a wonderful place for me. Golden Hills residence, resort style, with activities, bingo, even a little movie theater. It sounded more like a brochure than a real conversation. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, calm. Caleb cleared his throat, opened the folder, pulled out some documents, and slid them toward me. "Mom, you've been forgetting things. We just want to protect you, okay?" That word, protect, lit a fire in my chest. Those hands pushing papers at me now were the same hands I once taught to hold a pencil, the same ones I cradled when they had a fever, the same hands I cleaned when they came in from playing in the dirt. "You already signed the power of attorney?" Karen whispered. My knees nearly gave out. Had I? I tried to remember. After that fall last autumn, I do recall a night. Karen brought Chinese food and some papers to take care of quickly. I trusted her. An hour later, my life was packed into a suitcase. One suitcase. That was it. They didn't even let me choose which picture frame to bring. My home, with the smell of coffee, echoes of old laughter, and the memory of Martin, was emptied like it was just another address, just a space. The car ride was silent. Ethan drove. Karen sat in front, scrolling through her phone like it was just another Tuesday. Caleb was next to me, eyes fixed out the window. When we arrived, the building looked more like an office than a home. No trees, no flowers. A nurse stood outside smiling far too much, a rehearsed kind of smile. That first night, I cried like a scared little girl, face buried in the pillow so no one would hear. It wasn't just the place, not the pale walls, not even the sterile smell of disinfectant. It was something deeper, because that night, for the first time I realized, to them, I wasn't a woman anymore. I was just a burden. But let me tell you something. I'm the kind of woman who rises, even if it takes time, even if it hurts, and it was right there, in that cold, unfamiliar room, that I began finding my way back to myself. It took weeks before I could take a deep breath without feeling that burning tightness in my chest. The room they put me in was small, like the world itself had shrunk on purpose. A narrow bed with a stiff mattress, a dresser that smelled like old wood, and a closet that creaked every time I opened it. The walls, painted a lifeless pale beige, seemed to swallow my voice whole. And the sound, the only constant sound, was the ticking of the clock at the end of the hallway. Tick-tock, tick-tock. It reminded me that time was still moving. Time and nothing else. The days dragged by, filled with prepackaged routines: breakfast at 7 a.m., medication at 8:30, physical therapy twice a week, bingo on Tuesdays. That's how they filled the time there, with distractions. But no distraction was big enough to cover the hole I felt in my chest. I watched. Quietly. I'd sit in the common areas like I didn't care, like I didn't belong to anything anymore. But I saw everything. The worn-out faces, the overwhelmed caregivers, the residents who talked to themselves, repeating old stories to no one at all. It was like living in a never-ending waiting room. Waiting for what? Death? A miracle? A phone call that would never come? One slow afternoon, I saw Ruth for the first time. She was playing cards with a red-haired nurse named Lindsay, laughing loudly, this sharp, shattering laugh that cracked the silence like broken glass. Her laughter was bold, rebellious, like she was telling the world, "I'm still here." She noticed me watching her. "You're new, huh?" she said, tilting her head with curiosity. Got that look, like someone who's been betrayed by the people she used to call family. I gave her an awkward smile. "Am I right?" she pressed, her eyes sparkling like a mischievous teenager. I nodded, and for the first time in weeks, I let out a short laugh. "You nailed it." That's how. Ruth pulled me into the small whirlwind of life she had created in that place. With her came Dolores, everyone called her Dewey, and Maxine, the most serious of the trio, with sharp eyes and an upright posture that dared anyone to challenge her. Dewey was soft-spoken, usually found with a book of poetry resting in her lap. And Maxine? Maxine was made of stone, a fortress of truths and hard-earned lessons. We started eating lunch together, then joining the games. And at night, when the halls were quiet and the staff weren't watching, we'd gather in the lounge with stale cookies and cheap tea, swapping real stories. Stories of loss, betrayal, long silences, and the tiny victories that no one outside those walls would ever bother to notice. One evening, after Lindsay had turned off the lights and the hallway slipped into its nightly hush, I told them my story. My children's betrayal, the papers I signed without understanding, the home they took from me. Maxine, who had been sitting with her arms crossed, slowly uncrossed them. "You signed the deed?" she asked, her voice serious. "No," I replied, almost instinctively. "At least, I don't think I did. I still had the paperwork stored away in an old folder." She raised an eyebrow. "If the house is still in your name, sweetheart, you're holding gold in your hands." That sentence hit me like a lit match, a spark, a flicker of what still could be. Later that night, I searched for that old folder. It was buried deep in the drawer, hidden like treasure waiting to be found. My fingers trembled as I unzipped it. There it was, the original deed, with my name. No signature from Karen, no record of transfer, no legal change. I sat on the edge of my bed, the paper shaking in my lap. My mouth went dry, my eyes welled up. They wanted to sell my house, not out of love, not out of care, but for profit, and something ancient stirred in me. Anger? Yes. Pain? Still. But along with all that, strength. The same strength that got me out of bed after Martin died. The same strength that pushed me through double shifts to pay for their college. The same strength that made me a woman. And there, alone in that stuffy room, I prayed. Not for peace, not even for forgiveness. I prayed for clarity, for a sign, and it came the very next day. Maxine walked into the dining hall wearing her deep purple sweater, her eyes glowing with fire. "Guess who? Just got back from her son's wedding," she announced with a sly grin. I smiled. The game had begun. The morning sun barely slipped through the blinds in the dining hall when Maxine sat down beside me with a cup of black coffee. Her eyes were sharp, focused, the kind that didn't blink even to breathe. Ruth showed up next, her slippers dragging, loudly across the floor, wearing a lavender sweater with rhinestone buttons. Dewey followed close behind, smiling the kind of smile that hides secrets in its corners. "Well?" Maxine asked. No small talk, like a lawyer addressing the court. "Do you have the papers?" I nodded, sliding the brown folder across the table. She opened it carefully. Each page was examined like it held a life. "Maybe it did. Deeds still in your name," she muttered. "No record of transfer, not even a notarized signature." Dewey covered her mouth in surprise. Ruth let out a low whistle. "Girl, you're sitting on a gold mine, and they have no clue." I went quiet. Looked around. Other residents were spreading jam on toast or debating which color to paint their nails. The radio played an instrumental version of "What a Wonderful World," but the air around our table was charged, electric. "What if they try to sell it anyway?" I whispered. Maxine crossed her arms. "If you sell first, they've got no legal ground. Now, if they forge your signature, that's a crime. But they'll only go that far if they realize they've lost control. Right now, they still think. You're here. Quiet, surrendered." That word echoed inside me. Surrendered. No, that wasn't me, not ever. I had just stayed silent for too long. "Then I'll sell it," I said softly, but steady. Like someone about to take a deep breath before diving underwater, Ruth clapped her hands. "Now that's what I'm talking about. The old lioness is awake." And that's how it began. A quiet revolution of tea, folders, and secret phone. Calls made from the arts and crafts room. Maxine activated her old network. Lawyers, realtors, even a guy named Jack Winston, who supposedly owed her a favor from a case back in 1997. Ruth rekindled an old flame with a retired real estate agent. Named Ted. Said he still wore aftershave and cried during Titanic reruns. Dewey handled the technicals. She created an email account for me, set up online banking, and figured out how to bypass the facility's Wi-Fi restrictions. And me? I started feeling something I thought was long gone. Excitement. I walked the halls with a secret smile. Played sweet on the phone with Karen, thanking her for her concern and care. She had no idea. Maybe she never really knew me at all. That same week, the buyers came. A young couple charmed by the neighborhood and the front garden, planted by Martin and me one summer, back when we still believed love was enough. They offered full price, no bargaining. Everything went through Jack, who still wore bow ties and hated in-person meetings. Maxine took care of the paperwork. I just signed, firmly, without hesitation. And by the end of that Friday, the money was deposited into an account under my name, mine and mine alone. I tucked the printed receipt into my sweater pocket, not because I needed it, but because I wanted to feel it, real, tangible. The hardest part was still to come, leaving. Ruth had the plan. Bingo night, hardly anyone around. I convinced Lindsay to skip your check-in, bribed her with a bottle of French perfume I'd hidden since 2004, and a frozen pizza. My suitcase was small, like the one from the day they dragged me out of my house. But this time, I chose what to bring: my passport, the digitized deed, that coral lipstick Martin loved, and the goodbye letter. "Don't look for me. I went after the life you tried to steal from me. Eleanor. We took an old Uber with no air conditioning and a soft-spoken driver. Ruth, Maxine, Dewey, and me. No one talked much. The tension was thick, but there was laughter bubbling just beneath it. Was I escaping or being set free? The airport felt like a sanctuary. White lights, voices in every language, the rolling sound of suitcases dragging behind their owners. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. Was I scared? Yes, but more than that, I felt alive. Rome would be our first stop. I didn't know what was waiting for me, but I knew exactly what I'd left behind, and that set me free. Rome. The word tasted different when spoken with freedom. It felt like a secret whispered by the wind. When the plane touched down, my stomach flipped, not because of the turbulence, but because deep down I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The city greeted us with the scent of fresh baked bread, stones soaked in morning dew, and something sweet and ancient I couldn't quite name. Maybe it was freedom. Maybe it was the scent of courage finally taking root. We passed through customs with ease, 3 silver-haired women, one of them dragging a floral suitcase and wearing a defiant sparkle in her eyes. The officer didn't blink. Rome had probably seen much stranger things. We checked into a modest guest house in Trastevere. The facade was simple, but flower pots filled the windows, and a creaky wooden staircase groaned like it carried old stories. Our room smelled like lavender and clean linen. The curtains were light and sheer, letting in the golden glow of late afternoon, so warm it felt spiritual. Ruth was enchanted by the sheets. "Softer than my nonna's," she said, giggling like a child. Maxine checked the door locks and emergency exits like a retired detective. Doye, the romantic, wrote the name of the guest house into the first line of a spontaneous poem. I sat on the edge of the bed and let my body sink into the mattress. Exhaustion wrapped around me, but it was the good kind, the kind that follows, doing something hard and necessary. That evening, we walked through the cobblestone streets, our footsteps tapping over layers of history. Every corner offered something magical, a violinist playing under a balcony, a child darting past with gelato in hand, an old man nodding as if he'd seen it all before. Ruth haggled with a silk scarf vendor. Maxine flirted with a waiter named Enzo. Doyi bought postcards and wrote one to her late husband, just as she did every year. "Just so I don't forget what it feels like to miss someone who mattered," she said softly, eyes glistening. And me. I stood still in front of the Colosseum, feeling the warm wind against my face and the centuries dripping down the stones as if whispering, "You're still here." For the first time in years, I wasn't a burden. I wasn't a body waiting to be cared for. I was a woman, whole, present, hungry for life. On our third night, that peace was interrupted by a breeze from the past. I opened my email, something I probably shouldn't have done, but curiosity speaks with its own voice. 10 messages from Karen. The last one read, "What did you do?" I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The subject line said enough. She knew about the house, the money, the escape. Her voice echoed in my head, but for the first time, I didn't feel guilt. I felt relief. She was shocked. She was afraid. Because I had finally done something for me. Maxine found me on the balcony, laptop resting on my knees. "You okay?" she asked, lighting a cigarette she'd been hiding from the guest house owner. "I thought I'd feel remorse," I said. "But I don't." She took a drag and replied, "That's because it's not revenge, Ellie. It's recovery. They chose themselves. You chose you." We sat in silence. The Roman sky was a soft lilac curtain streaked with golden threads. The sound of dishes being washed, children playing, and a woman singing in Italian swirled in the breeze, and there, on That balcony, I realized. I hadn't run away. I'd been found by myself. The next morning, we boarded a train to Florence, a trip I'd always dreamed of but never dared to take. Inside the train car, Dewey read poetry out loud in a whisper. Maxine slept with her head leaning against the window. Ruth handed out peppermint candies to strangers like she was on a peacekeeping mission. I stared out the window as the Italian countryside rolled past like a movie someone had written just for me, and for the first time in decades, I thought, maybe the best part of life hasn't passed. Maybe it's still ahead. Morning in Florence arrived with the scent of sweet bread and the distant sound of bells. Light slipped through the cracks in our rented room's shutters, painting the walls in soft golden tones. We were staying in an old townhouse, peeling. Wallpaper, creaky wooden floors, and a narrow balcony overlooking a garden full of lemon trees. I was digging through my suitcase looking for a sock when I found an envelope tucked into a side pocket. A crumpled manila envelope with my name written on the front, in handwriting I knew. Martin's. My fingers trembled. Inside were 6 letters, all written over the course of 5 years before he passed. I sat on the edge of the bed and read them. One by one, as the sounds of the outside world faded away, they were tender, loving, but filled with concern. He'd seen it, the signs, in our children, in their tone, in the way they spoke to me when they thought he wasn't listening. One line stopped me cold. Ellie, if you're reading this, something must have happened. And if I'm wrong, thank God. But if I'm right, please don't let them erase you. You've always been stronger than you realize. The words melted in my hands. I cried like a little girl, the kind of cry that burns through your chest, but frees you. There, on the edge of that bed in Florence, I buried the last remnants of guilt. Martin knew. He had always known. And even in death, he was still protecting me. That night, I told the girls everything. I showed them the letters. Ruth went quiet. Maxine bit her lip. Dewey wept gently, tracing the edge of the envelope with her fingers like it was sacred. We need to tell this story, Maxine finally said. Not just yours, Ellie, all of ours. This happens more than we think, and it could save other women. And that's how the idea was born. To speak, to stop whispering, to let the world know. Maxine called in an old favor, Megan Laird, a journalist in New York who hosted a podcast for women over 50. Megan listened to everything, and within a week she flew to Lisbon, our next stop. But before all that, I got a phone call. I was standing on a beach, toes in the cold Portuguese surf, when my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Silence. Then a shaky breath. Grandma. My world stopped. Emily? My voice cracked. She was crying. My youngest granddaughter, the one who used to follow me around the garden asking questions about birds. I saw everything. The letters. The podcast. I just needed to hear your voice. My legs gave out. I sat down in the wet sand, the wind biting at my skin, but I didn't care. Please don't hang up, she begged. I just want to talk. I just want to see you. Her words pierced the crust around my heart. The old pain, the buried longing, the love I thought had died. I need time, I said quietly. I'm not ready yet. That's okay, she whispered. I'll wait. The phone slipped from my lap. Ruth rushed over and snatched it up before the tide could take it. Who was it? She asked. My granddaughter, I said. She found me. That night was still. We ate dinner under the Lisbon sky, the sun dipping into the horizon like it knew something was changing in me. 2 days later, Emily sent me a photo. It was of my old house. But not like I remembered it. The blue shutters had been painted. Beige. The rose bushes. Gone. The porch. Unrecognizable. They destroyed everything, the caption read. I held the photo for a long time, my chest tight, eyes dry. Ruth stepped away. Dewey cried again. Maxine lit a cigarette and said, "It's time to tell the whole story. The silence that had protected me for years now needed to be broken. The pain I had buried might just help someone else heal." We met Megan Laird at a small cafe along the banks of the Tagus River. She arrived alone, carrying a worn-out backpack and eyes that missed nothing. She wore a plain shirt, dark jeans, and not a trace of makeup. But there was something about her, something that instantly put us at ease. She looked people in the eye and listened with her heart. "All I ask is the truth," was all she said, and I told her. Everything. No filters, no embellishments. From beginning to end. I told her about the years of silence, the surrender, the sacrifices, about the birthdays, planned with spare change, about the notebooks full of bills and the sleepless nights sewing costumes for my children. I told her about the moment I stopped being a mother and started being a burden, and the day they took me from my home like an outdated piece of furniture. Megan recorded everything with a small voice recorder. Sometimes she paused for a detail, a feeling, a name, but never to judge. When the interview ended, she turned off. The recorder took my hand and said, "You have no idea how much this matters. You are the voice of thousands." The episode aired 7 days later. A 1-hour podcast, raw, intense, true, and it blew up. Over 400,000 listens in 1 week, women in their 50s, 60s, 70s, all writing to us. This happened to me too. I thought I was going crazy. My son locked me in a room because I kept forgetting the keys. My daughter emptied my bank account saying she was just taking care of me. The pain was collective, but now it had a name, a voice, a face, mine, not because I wanted it, but because I survived. And sometimes surviving is the most revolutionary act there is. Karen messaged me. "How could you?" Luke tried to call. David left a drunken voicemail, filled with veiled threats. I deleted them all. But then a new message arrived from Emily. "Grandma, I left home. I'm staying with my aunt, on my dad's side. I can't even look at Mom without hearing your story echo in my head. I want to see you, anywhere. Just tell me where." I showed the message to the girls. Ruth wrinkled her nose. Maxine crossed her arms. Doyi just hugged me. "Sometimes healing means giving one last chance," she whispered. I chose the place. Savannah, Georgia. A place I'd always wanted to see. They say the air smells like magnolia and memories. It felt like the perfect spot for something between a reunion and release. She was waiting for me on a bench in Forsyth Park. The tree above her looked frozen in time, with moss hanging like green veils. Emily stood when she saw me, eyes full of tears, lips trembling. It was her. But it wasn't. She wasn't a girl anymore. She was someone broken and rebuilt. "Hi, Grandma," she whispered. "Hi, my love." We hugged. Long, unhurried, a hug that healed old cracks. A hug that said, "I still love you, even after all of it." We walked through the park. She asked me about Martin, about my childhood, about who I was before I became just somebody's mom. And I told her. For the first time, I told it. All to someone who truly wanted to hear. She told me how she found the letters, how she confronted her mother, how she was slapped, and how she couldn't stay after that, how she needed to figure out who she was before anger consumed her. "I don't want to become what they became," she said, her voice shaking with a fear I knew all too well. I held her again. "Then don't. You still have a choice." In the days that followed, she joined us. She walked with Ruth, listened to poetry from Dewey, helped Maxine organize paperwork. It felt like a renewal, a bridge between past and future, between pain and redemption. One night, under the stars on the porch of our rented house, she turned to me and asked, "What if we built something? A place for women like you, like us?" I went silent. The idea felt too big, too impossible. And yet, so right. The next morning, over coffee and a slice of cornbread, we wrote the name on a napkin, Grace Eleanor Foundation. She drew little stars around it, and in my steady handwriting, I wrote, "For all the women who were forgotten. For all those who are still fighting." The name was there, written on a coffee-stained paper napkin, Grace Eleanor Foundation. So simple, so small. And yet, it was like a spark catching in dry grass. All it needed was a breath of courage to become a flame. Emily dove in head first. That fire in her eyes reminded me of Martin, when he believed in something with all his heart. She bought the website domain in less than a day, wrote the homepage content with trembling hands, pausing between sips of tea. Every time she doubted herself, she'd show it to me. "Grandma, can you read it? Is it clear enough?" I read, and each word was like a mirror. I saw myself in it, in the verbs, in the spaces between the lines, in the promise that no woman would ever again have to feel like it was too late to begin again. We launched a small fundraising campaign, simple, modest, just to test the waters. We used a photo of me smiling on the porch in Savannah and a short message. She was abandoned by her own family, but she decided not to end her life in silence. Now, she wants to help other women do the same. It went viral. In the first 3 days, we received hundreds of messages. Women in their 50s, 60s, 80s, some with tearful eyes, others with clenched fists. My daughter filed guardianship without telling me. My grandson took everything. I thought I was the only one, but they weren't. The pain was widespread, yet invisible. And now it had form. It had a voice. It had a mission. Our foundation's first action was a modest online support group. A Zoom call with 10 women from all across the U.S., South Carolina, Nevada, Illinois, Oklahoma. Different stories. But one common thread: they had been silenced, and now they spoke. Ruth joined the very first session, wearing polka-dot pajamas and red lipstick. "Ladies," she said, "let me tell you something. There's no such thing as too late to flip the table. All you have to do is stop asking for permission to live." They laughed. Some cried. Others just stayed quiet, the kind of silence that comes when, for the first time, someone truly sees you. Meanwhile, Maxine handled the legal paperwork. She called up old grump Jack Winston, the cheddar-loving lawyer who only worked to the sound of opera. Dewey wrote letters, by hand, one by one. She said writing was still the gentlest touch in a world that had forgotten how to be tender. Then, we received a generous donation from a woman named Helen from Vermont. "My daughter left me at a hospital and never came back. I heard your podcast. I'm alive because of your story. Use this money to create a real home." And that's how the idea for our first physical refuge was born. A house, a home, a space where women left behind could find shelter, and above all else, dignity. We named it Grace House, in honor of the kind of strength that comes through grace. In honor of a woman who had everything taken from her and still stood tall. We found a property in Rochester, New York. 5 bedrooms, a backyard garden, a long porch with rocking chairs. The paint was chipped, the roof needed work. But the moment we stepped inside, the air seemed to whisper, "This is it," Emily cried. "It's like this house has been waiting for us, Grandma." We started the renovation with donations, volunteers, and sheer stubbornness. Maxine yelled at contractors. Ruth organized meals. Dewey taped messages of hope to the mirrors in every room. "You are still here. This is not the end. You matter." On opening day, I was more nervous than I'd ever been. I wore a navy blue dress, flat shoes, and the pearl necklace Martin gave me on our 10th anniversary. My hands trembled as I cut the red ribbon. But the moment I crossed the threshold, I felt peace. The house filled with voices. Timid women at first, eyes low, hands clasped tightly in their laps. But by the end of the first week, they were laughing, telling stories, looking at themselves in the mirror again. The flame had spread. And me? I spent my mornings on the porch, coffee in hand and notebook in my lap. I wrote memories, verses, reflections. Sometimes, I just sat and listened to the wind rustling the trees, because after so much noise, silence, too, can heal. The following autumn, Grace House turned 3 months old, and the house no longer felt the same. The once blank walls were now lined with photos, embroidered hangings, and laughter. The smell of bread baking mingled with the flowers Ruth had planted by the porch. Every corner breathed redemption. Emily had the idea to host Thanksgiving dinner right there, open to every woman who had passed through our doors. Some returned, others sent letters, videos, or promises to visit soon. But 22 came back. Some arrived wearing pearl necklaces passed down from mothers long gone. Others wore simple blouses and carried shy eyes. Each brought her story, her scar, her reason. The table was long, made of light wood, donated by a woman named Lillian. She had kept it hidden in a garage for 10 years after her ex-husband told her she wasn't worthy of receiving guests. Now the table was full, colorful plates, dishes filled with family recipes, candles glowing softly. Each woman had brought something, a dish, a poem, a memory. Emily darted around the room, straightening napkins, adjusting the soft jazz playlist, tucking little notes into each seat that read, "You are loved." When I sat at the head of the table, I felt a warmth ripple up my spine. I looked around, Ruth, with a red scarf wrapped around her hair, sitting beside Dennis, who had become a permanent fixture. Dewey, in a lavender knit dress, smiling like someone who already knew how the story would end. Maxine, carving the turkey like she was slicing justice with her bare hands. And Emily, standing behind me, her hands on my shoulders, steady, loyal. I stood up with a glass of cider in hand. My voice faltered at first, but then it flowed, like an ancient river. This year, I didn't lose everything. This year, I found what I was missing. Silence. I found purpose in the ashes. Family beyond blood. I found myself, for the first time, whole. And I want you all to know, this house isn't a shelter for pain. It's a home for rebirth. Glasses were raised. There were tears. There was laughter. There was peace. Ruth, who never got emotional, stood up and placed a crown of flowers on my head. It was silly, made of daisies and ivy, but I wore it like a queen's crown, because for the first time I understood. Royalty has nothing to do with thrones. It's about rising after you've been thrown to the ground. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Emily and I sat out on the porch. "Grandma," she began, "do you remember Grandpa's last letter, that final one?" I nodded already, feeling the tightness in my chest. "What did you wish for when you let it go?" I stayed quiet, looked up at the starry sky, took a deep breath. That someone, someday, would truly see me. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I do. I always have." The next morning she handed me an envelope. It was confirmation. We'd been nominated for a national award, the Women of Strength Legacy Grant, a recognition for empowering women with dignity and voice. She jumped with joy. Maxine shouted while holding the printed email. Ruth declared, "We were going to need a new dress." Dewey wrote a 3-stanza poem using only words starting with the letter G. And me? I sat down on the couch and cried. Not for the money, but for the words, "We honor you." No one had ever said that to me before. The award allowed us to open 3 new houses in less than 6 months: Asheville, Michigan, and Oregon. Each one had a brightly colored door, a welcoming front porch, and a hand-painted sign that read, "Here, you are not a burden. Here, you begin again." The stories multiplied. Women who arrived with souls in fragments, left with eyes full of light. There was a quiet strength spreading through these homes, a kind of revolution made of tea, tenderness, and deep listening. It wasn't about charity. It was about justice, about giving women back what they should never have lost: dignity. Every day I woke early. I'd sit on the porch of Grace House with my coffee and a notebook in my lap. The breeze would drift gently across the yard, and I'd write thoughts, verses, memories. Sometimes I'd just watch the birds in the garden, the leaves turning color, the women walking in pairs down the path. It felt like living inside a prayer. Emily told me she wanted to turn it all into a book. Not just your story, Grandma. The story of all of us. The pain we kept quiet, the miracles we built. We named the book Not Done Yet. She treated every page like a wound that had healed. She interviewed Ruth, Dewey, Maxine, and so many women who had passed through our homes. We launched it with a garden party at Grace House. There was lemon cake, candles in mason jars, live music. People came from all over the country, even some of the children who had once been the cause of pain, returned. Not all, but some. And that was already a miracle. Emily stayed close to me the whole evening. Her parents were there, her biological, Dad and his wife. They brought flowers. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with tears, "for giving her back to the world, stronger than when she left." At the end of the night, once everyone had gone, I sat on the porch with my notebook and looked up at the sky. Maxine came over with a blanket draped over her shoulders and a cup of tea in hand. "You know what you did, Ellie?" she asked. I looked at her. "You rewrote the ending." I shook my head, smiling softly. "No, Maxine, I just finally started telling the truth." She laughed, that same husky, warm laugh that had carried me since those first days in the home. And there, in that silence, I knew there was no more space for bitterness, only for seeds, seeds of the future. Not long after, Emily came to find me. Her eyes were glowing. "Grandma, I want to do more. I want to study geriatric psychology. I want to help these women on a deeper level." I hugged her tightly. "Go, my love. Go far. Just don't forget where you came from." "Never," she said, "because that's where I was truly born." And just like that, without fanfare or grand announcements, another woman had begun to bloom. A woman with deep roots and outstretched branches. A woman who burned with me and chose to spread the light. The last morning of spring arrived, quietly, wrapped in mist and the scent of damp earth. I woke early, as always, the same ceramic mug in my hands, the same seat on the porch, the same notebook in my lap. But somehow, everything was different. Inside me, something had settled. Like a forgotten puzzle piece finally finding its place, Emily came out of her room, still in pajamas, wrapped in a floral blanket. She sat beside me and said nothing at first. "It feels different today, doesn't it?" she said, resting her head on my shoulder. "It does," I replied. "Why?" I took a while to find the words. "Because today is the first day I'm not running from anything. Not from pain, not from guilt, not from time. Today, I'm just living." She didn't answer. She just squeezed my hand, and in that gesture, I understood. What started with me wouldn't end with me. That afternoon, we held a ceremony. Simple, no podium, no long speeches. We called it the Night of Names. We placed a glass bowl in the center of the common room, with a single lit candle inside. Each woman was given a smaller candle and just one question. Whose name do you want to honor tonight? Some whispered the names of forgotten mothers. Others honored former versions of themselves. Some couldn't speak at all, just let the tears fall as they lit their candles with trembling hands. When my turn came, I said, Eleanor Grace Miller, the woman who waited her whole life to be heard, and one day chose to scream. Candles were placed in the bowl, the flames floated, danced, and stayed like the kind of memories that set us free. That night, Emily came to me, her eyes shining. Grandma, I want to write another book. About what? About how older women are quietly changing the world. Then write it, I smiled, because it's true. Weeks passed, then months. Grace Haven, the big dream born on a napkin, became real. 2 stories, green shutters, a porch that wraps its arms around anyone who walks in. And inside, everyday miracles. Clara, who'd been evicted by her own son, now taught gardening out back. Naomi, who'd been forcibly placed in a care home, taught adapted yoga. Harriet, who once arrived without a single word, now organized. Breakfast, and told terrible jokes between bites of toast. Every woman who walked through that door brought an unanswered question, an unacknowledged longing, a forgotten name, and left with a new verb: begin again. One quiet afternoon, while I was watering the plants with Ruth, Maxine walked up holding an envelope. It was an official letter. The foundation had received a national endorsement as a transformative project for aging women. You've become a statistic, Ellie, Maxine said, laughing. But the good kind, I smiled. But that night, something stirred in me. I clutched my notebook, walked to the garden, sat under the warm light of the lamps, and wrote, If you're reading this, maybe you think it's too late to change your story. Maybe someone made you believe that everything you were is already behind you. But listen from here. You are still here. There is still air in your lungs. There are still embers in your chest. And there is still time to plant, to speak, to go, to return, to begin. Because you're not done yet. At the final paragraph, I stopped and took a deep breath. Looked up at the sky, and I imagined Martin up there, holding my hand, smiling just like he did the first time we danced in the kitchen. We did it, my love, I whispered. You were right. I was stronger than I thought. I closed the notebook, and I knew right then that my home was never made of bricks. My home was made of women, of memories, of redemption. And even after I'm gone, the flame will keep burning. If you've made it this far, this story belongs to you too. Maybe you've been silenced, forgotten, dismissed. Maybe someone told you it was too late, but hear this well. You are not alone. And no, you're not done yet. If this story touched your heart, please share it. Subscribe to this channel. It's a simple act, but it helps light shine where darkness still lingers. And always remember, you are worthy, you are strong, and you deserve to be heard. From one woman to another, with all my heart, thank you for existing.